Now, it's time for the Anchormen podcast with Matt Gaetz and Dan Ball.
Welcome back to our Anchorman program. I'm Matt Gaetz, host of the Matt Gaetz Show here on One American News. You can catch our program 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Central, and this is a fun little project we do with some of the brilliant folks who hang out here at One American News all day. We're going to talk about some of the issues of the day. I am joined, as always, by my friend and on-again, off-again employee, Vish Burra. He was the founding producer of Bannon's War Room. He's now a producer on The Matt Gaetz Show and also served on Congressional Hill as a staffer. And then the host of The Sharp Report rejoins us, Pearson Sharp. You can catch his terrific investigative reporting, opinion, news, analysis, all here on One American News. And there is a lot going on, but the reason I wanted Pearson on, he sent me on our buddy text chain a Ron DeSantis take on the activities we've seen recently in the Congress. And I want to hear from the governor, get Pearson's reaction, and then talk about it. Governor Ron DeSantis.
You know, Elon Musk went into this DOGE effort. He was getting lampooned. I mean, like, they're firebombing his Tesla dealerships. Media smearing him relentlessly. His businesses suffered, all this stuff, because he basically said, look, we can't keep doing this, and we need to moderate and reduce the amount of money that the federal government is spending. And yet, we have a Republican Congress, and to this day, we're in the end of May, past Memorial Day, and not 1 cent in DOGE cuts have been implemented by the Congress. DOGE and Elon were on a collision course with the swamp. And the question is, what would happen? And I don't think there's any question that DOGE fought the swamp, and so far, the swamp has won.
Pearson, did this speak right to your soul, and why?
Yes. But coming from Florida, I'm sure you have a more nuanced position and opinion on DeSantis. But I think what he says makes a lot of sense, at least on the surface. And I know you're going to talk about that. I think we as voters have been, at least I have been, disappointed that the $2 trillion in cuts that we were promised have been steadily whittled down to almost nothing. What is $170 billion, I think right now is the latest figure. That's great, but we have $36 trillion in debt. Like, that's less than a drop in the bucket. So I think what he's saying makes a lot of sense. And Musk has been turned into kind of a whipping boy, as he said. You know, his project went out there to fix all these legitimate problems that we have with our government. Number one being this out of control spending. This debt is killing us. $2 billion a day, $1 trillion a year. That's unsustainable. We can't fix that. So I think what he set out to do was wonderful, and the fact that we can't get the Republicans to get behind it is very telling. I think a lot of these Republicans are, you know, Democrats with a red suit, and we've got to fix that. We can't go on like this.
Okay, so before we get to Vish's take, do you grant DeSantis's core premise that Elon fought the swamp and the swamp won?
Well, I don't think the battle's over yet. But at this point, Elon has definitely taken a step back. I mean, he said so himself. He said, you know, I tried my best, and I think he has. He's lost a lot of support from people who I think never really supported him. They did on paper because it was what Trump did and what Trump wanted. But I don't think he's given up. I think we still have a chance, but we need to push for it, and we need to hold people accountable who should be fighting for the same things that we're fighting for.
But there's some who would say that the passage of this government funding legislation that doesn't bake in the DOGE cuts forevermore,
right,
is the seminal moment. Yeah. It is the make or break. Did this sink in? Did this really happen? Because I remember, and you remember, all of these members of Congress saying, oh, I'm in the DOGE caucus, and here's my selfie with Elon, and here's my repost of Elon at CPAC with a chainsaw, and I am totally here for this. And then you know what? It got real.
They totally weren't.
And then it got real. And then you saw the bureaucrats actually packing up their boxes at USAID. You actually saw the divisions of the Department of Education that were going to be shut down. We actually started having real conversations
what it meant,
about sending food stamps and other public welfare programs to the states rather than having all the federal strings attached. And these people blinked. They totally blinked. And it wasn't Elon's fault, and it wasn't Trump's fault. Trump would have signed any government funding bill probably that they would send him that had the tax cuts in it and a lot of the pro-growth policies he's been fighting for. But it's Congress that has shown the unwillingness to make the cuts.
Absolutely.
So in that respect, you look at DeSantis and you see what in his reflection in this manner.
Well, he's just calling out what the rest of us are seeing, or at least what I'm seeing, and what we've talked about ad nauseum. I like every time we talk, we bring this up, and he's just pointing that out, that we have this big problem. And Musk himself said that he was disappointed in Trump's bill. He said, we've got 36 trillion, and this adds another 3.1 trillion at least. And I don't know if the tax cuts and everything else, the growth measures, are going to make up for that in the long run.
Well, yeah, let me be straight with you and the audience. We are going to 50 trillion in debt. There's not a single person who has proposed a single plan that has been voted on even one time in the House or Senate that would ameliorate that eventuality. I think about a country that's $50 trillion in debt, and I think about a country that doesn't own its own future.
Exactly.
So that's
owned by the banks, or owned by foreign interests.
But chomping at the bit is political operative information warfare extraordinaire. And while you and I are having a reasonable, high-minded debate about the critical importance of reducing federal spending, Vish sees Ron DeSantis in that video, and he makes a crass, cold political calculation. Vish Burrow, what do you see?
These comments by Ron DeSantis, this is basically him angling and making an overture to Elon Musk to be his number one funder for the 2028 primary campaign he's going to wage against JD.
So you believe this is the first chess move in the big battle for the Elon 2028 endorsement?
Well, I don't think it's the first chess move, but I think this is the chess move, a big chess move that shows that he's going for the big money.
That we all saw.
Yes, that we all saw, and it's clear as day. I mean, look, I think it's also disingenuous that Ron is going out and saying that, mainly because if Ron DeSantis was in the Congress today, right now, and he had to vote on that bill,
totally would have voted for it.
He would have voted for it.
100%.
So, and why is that? Because Ron DeSantis is a normal politician who all the same normal political pressures apply to him and affect him just like every other normal politician we know.
Pearson? You were so inspired to hear Governor DeSantis wax poetic about the need for these reductions. When you hear us say that he would definitely have voted for that bill, does it hurt?
It doesn't hurt, and it makes sense. But this is where, when you and I had these conversations, and when I talked with you, I told you this earlier. I feel like, you guys, you see the inside of the political machine. You know how the gears operate, and I feel like a country bumpkin, when we talk about this stuff, because I'm just looking at its surface value,
Public, man.
And I'm like, hey, yeah, DeSantis said he's disappointed in this. I'm disappointed in this. I agree with that. And you're over here like, that snake.
I mean, look, it's
but by the way,
true.
I got to pull on the string though here.
Uh-huh.
Is he the front runner for the Elon endorsement for 2028?
Well, you know what? He was the front runner for the Elon endorsement in 2024. Remember when Ron DeSantis made an announcement or was going to announce his campaign?
Yeah.
He was going to do it on Twitter on whose space? Elon Musk's space, the space that would eventually crash. But nonetheless, Elon was already ready for DeSantis back in 2024. Yeah, I think he's definitely at least primed for it in 2028. And I think that this also gets to Elon's, I guess you could say ego, where I'm sure Elon wants to see the DOGE cuts because they are a good thing and wants to see those things codified.
That's sincere patriotism.
Yeah, that is from my view. Yes, but there's also, on some personal level, he wants to see that through or wants another shot at it. And I think he would see if Ron DeSantis is getting and putting that up as a priority, he would get behind Ron.
Take though.
Yeah, but again, this is with the intent of primarying J.D. Vance and chipping off the
that's what I was
fiscal
gonna say.
conservatives, the Thomas Masseys of the world, the Chip Roys of the world, the Dana Loesch, Never Trump kind of cohort there that fiscal conservatism is like top priority for them. It's meant to chip off that block.
Yeah, I was gonna jump on that and say that your take assumes that DeSantis thinks that Vance is not going to be in the running.
Oh, he's going to hang it around his neck. But DeSantis is going to hang this bill around Vance's neck and say, "You were the guy who helped pass this monstrosity of a bill and ran us up into this debt and with all these deficits."
Indeed.
I could
like
see it clear
Game
as
of
day.
Thrones up in here.
You know, I would be advising him to do that.
So let's survey this question then among us. In the 2028 presidential primary, is the big beautiful bill going to be popular and something to run on, unpopular and something to run away from, or just white noise and not really a defining characteristic of that election? Which do you take, Fish?
It'll be white noise if there's no primary challenger to J.D. Vance.
Pearson?
Yeah, I think it's going to end up being white noise, but I think for people who pay attention like us, it's going to remain a disappointment because this is not what I wanted.
So I actually think that somebody's going to have to cast a vision beyond what this bill delivers us. Another way of agreeing with Pearson there, that if what you're running on is this stuff, it's not going to be something that draws people in to a coalition for the future. And right now, we're in this moment, right? Congress passes the big beautiful bill in the House. They go on break and they start having their town halls, and you start to see whether or not people are running toward this bill or away from it. And what I can see is that there are a lot of people who voted for this legislation who then sort of run against it in their rhetoric. Well, sure, I voted for it. We needed to advance the Trump agenda, didn't want to stand in the way of passage, but it drives up the debt. But it fails to do the DOGE stuff. But it doesn't include rescissions. But it still does too much of the Green New Deal.
So let me guess. Do you need another 2 years to try to get it done this time? That's
Click
the
here
thing.
to donate.
Yeah, it's not. Of course, they're just going to talk. I think that there's a fatigue amongst the American public that's setting in that understands we're never going to get these cuts. And again, it goes back to my point. That's why everyone's kind of on the dole, on the take on this stuff, where the mentality is if I'm never going to get the cuts that I'm being promised from my politicians, the cuts in the government, then I'm just going to what good are they? I'm just going to I'd rather some of that money come to me instead, and I'll vote for these guys if they give it to me.
I want to ask you though. You were on the inside. You were probably in this position before, so. These people you were talking about where they don't agree with the bill, but they feel compelled to vote for it. How does that work? Like, what do you do in that position?
Well, in the House of Representatives, where you have 435 people, no one really believes they can go at it alone. So whenever you want to demand a change to a particular bill, the first thing you need is at least one other person in the body who will sort of lash themselves to your fate and say, I'm with you unless XYZ change happens in the legislation. If you go in wanting 30, 40, 50 changes, oftentimes you're unable to marshal a sufficient group of people together around that many things. But you'll remember one of the things conservatives tried to stand against previously was the funding for Planned Parenthood. And so they'd get a batch of 15, 20, 35 that would say, well, if the government funding bill includes money for Planned Parenthood, then we're not going to vote for it. Well, now you don't even see that debate as a core feature of the negotiation. People have just kind of moved past it. And so people would pick things like funding for sanctuary cities and say, well, are there 5, 6, 7 of us who would be willing to die in that ditch? And what I can tell you is if whatever you think you start with as a bastion against a bad bill to try to make it better, you see it whittled down as people get told, well, Congressman Vish, you weren't for this, but we just found the resources for a new park in Staten Island. And well, Pearson, you've been working on this really important intellectual property change to protect our businesses from China. We'll throw that in, but then you got to vote for the big spending.
Soft bribery.
Yeah, and what happens is that people justify a suboptimal path for the country because there's an optimal path for one particular interest of theirs. And getting people to join together to reject the top line spending increases is very hard because of what Vish just explained. People have given up hope that we're going to have real spending reform, and they just say, well, to heck with it. If we're not going to have any real spending reform, don't cut my VA benefits. Don't have my my ne'er-do-well relative on SSID.
We'll let the country burn down,
more
but
rigorous.
what am I going to get out of it?
Right, and so
Let me get some.
People who are deemed the effective, smart, brilliant operators of Washington are the ones who know how to name their price to get to yes, and are able to extract the most for themselves or their districts or the causes they care about to get to yes. The problem is it ultimately leads you to this place we were just at, where you're $50 trillion in debt. And ultimately, the country will have to face severe austerity. And you think we're in civil unrest now?
Right.
Wait till we're $50 trillion in debt, and we're really having to cut things off. And we're really seeing supply chains short. We thought it was supply chain issues because you had to wait an extra 3 weeks for a sofa from IKEA. Wait till your supply chain issues is like the baby formula isn't coming.
And 50 trillion ain't that far away.
It's within 10 years.
Yeah, easily.
I mean, within 10 years, we're going to be $50 trillion in debt.
I hate politicians. I hate politicians. This is evil.
First time.
Yeah, I know.
First time. We have
no idealists. We have opportunists. There's no idealists.
No, they're all occupationalists. They're all there concerned with one thing, and that is, how do I get reelected the next go around?
Well, but that's kind of how I wanted to frame this discussion about this bill, because you can see how things really are playing out based on how these politicians are talking about them, even if it doesn't align with how they vote. You see, if there isn't a big groundswell of support for this bill, even people who voted for it will point out its flaws and how they worked to relieve flaws. We've had lawmakers we think highly of on our program this week who've said, well, there have been some senators who think this might spend too much money. If they want to chip away at more, they would do so with our support and our encouragement and our blessing. That's unusual. Usually when people vote for something, they want you to swallow the whole pill, right?
Right. Yeah. No, what they're trying to do is they're trying to pass the buck and say, well, I didn't cut that. The senators did. Right. That's the thing. It's all about, who can I point at to get the thing I want with none of the skin in the game, Well,
the skin in the game and the leverage and the willingness to endure pain is where I spent a lot of my time in Congress, because I got to the point where I was willing to endure the pain to try to drive people to address the
arguably more than anybody else.
Yeah, and look at where it got us. We're still going to that $50 trillion in debt because despite my efforts of firing the guy in charge, I couldn't get the institution on the rails of a funding system that would allow for the DOGE cuts to be made permanent, to get a vote for each and every one. But, we could probably throw an image on the screen. There were a number of Republican senators who voted against the DOGE cuts just to USAID. So forget the DOGE cuts that existed at IRS or at the Park Service or anywhere else. Just to the foreign money we, sprinkle about the world. And you had a neoconservative uniparty oppose Elon's efforts. I am encouraged nonetheless, because I do believe J.D. Vance is the heir apparent to this movement. And you know what people really think when they're saying stuff when maybe they don't ever know that that's going to be what people see. And one of the positives of that Houthi group chat is that you saw in J.D. Vance someone who was thoughtful, who asked precisely the questions we would want asked by a commander-in-chief in a circumstance such as this. And I actually think he's going to be a combination of tactical operational capability right alongside vision and inspiration and motivation for a lot of people.
Before we go into anything else, what is your best estimate? Because this is one of the things that I'd die for anybody who got this passed. How can we repeal the 16th Amendment?
The 16th Amendment as it relates to the direct
income
election?
Tax.
Well, the income tax, I don't think you're going to.
Because that was one of the things that Trump was talking about and talking about seriously. And I think that would be one of the massive things that could help our country, because the government would have to stop spending money.
No,
Yeah.
they would just borrow it.
Yeah, they would borrow it.
You would just get more monetary policy.
That's right. They'll find a way. The thing is, you can't stop the Leviathan, right? As much as we want for it to happen, as much as every politician you've grown up listening to promises that they could get it done, it's just not happening. Whether you can't starve the beast, you can't cut the beast down to size.
We had the greatest engineer in all of human history devoting his time and the time
One guy.
of brilliant minds. And we are left with these feelings that you have. And then you sort of wonder if our efforts are deployed to slowing the growth, not to stopping the Leviathan, but just slowing the growth. Is that enough? Because at this level of debt, is there an amount of growth that will save us? Is there a debt to GDP ratio that gets us out of the downfall?
There has to be some kind of technological breakthrough that creates a literal
energy?
or some kind of new plane. Yeah, either we need to create some kind of nuclear energy source that literally bring down energy to nothing. That might create a new plane of economic existence for us, where maybe we grow to a point that we're, a 50 trillion debt doesn't matter because we have a $200 trillion economy, because now we have free energy for everyone. Unless something like that happens, I don't think it's a waste of time to try and stop the Leviathan or slow the growth of the Leviathan and just put it on a leash and use it for your own purpose.
I read an article by Victor Davis Hanson today where he talked about 3 strategies for getting rid of debt historically. And none of them are ideal, but without massive cuts.
Lay them on us.
The first one is the Weimar Republic strategy, which seemed to be what Biden was doing. You just print trillions of dollars to pay back your debt with deflated currency or inflated currency.
Well, if that worked, Zimbabwe would be the most powerful country on earth.
Exactly. Yep.
We say Zimbabwe, do we?
So that's strategy 1. The second one, which has been tried many times and is also terrible, is confiscation of personal property. And governments throughout history have done that with disastrous results. The third one is we just wipe our hands and say, we don't owe anybody anything. We're erasing our debt and starting at zero, which is the cleanest option. But then who would ever buy bonds again from the government? Why would you ever do that again? So unless we can just massively cut down on all of this.
Do you think that would start wars if we told people we just weren't going to pay them?
It could, but we owe ourselves more money than we owe anybody else. So unless the banks have armies, China has 800 billion. I thought they had more, but apparently it's 800 billion. Most of it is owned by ourselves. Japan has the most, I think it's 1 trillion or something. So I don't know. But we've got to cut back drastically.
So you don't buy the theory that austerity is even achievable? Regular austerity?
You can just cutting spending?
Yeah, and just say, look, we can't be cradle-to-grave socialists anymore. We can't fund.
Well, no, we can't.
Education
we don't need
for
to.
illegal aliens.
We don't need to.
Healthcare for people who come here.
Well, we need to get rid of a lot of the welfare, maybe altogether. My dad made a great point. He said, when he was growing up, they didn't have welfare. And he said he can't remember anybody dying on the streets because they couldn't find food. There was nobody having that situation.
Because the private sector stepped in. Now you've created such a growth of public sector welfare that you've crowded out what was otherwise efficacious, church-inspired in many cases, distribution of resources to our fellow humans.
Well, and the percentage of people who were in that situation was much smaller then. Now, by feeding it, you've helped it grow, and it's just out of control at this point. So I think any solution is going to be extremely painful, and that's going to make the person who does it very unpopular, even if it's exactly what we need.
Well, and we may not be at that moment with the majorities we have in the House and Senate, but Vish isn't waiting for bigger majorities. He wants to see this majority actually taken out for a spin and used. And he doesn't. You don't want the Ron DeSantis lecture, huh?
No, absolutely not. I don't want the Ron DeSantis lecture. And it's not that he's wrong. he's right, but he's saying it for all the wrong reasons, and we all know that. That's why I don't like the messenger on that. But I do think that he's right. I want to see the majority actually govern, and it's just not happening.
We are going to turn our attention to a foreign policy issue that is ripe in the news. But first, folks, there's some real momentum right now in the fight for affordable health care. President Trump just signed a powerful executive order to drive down prescription drug prices across the board. But here's the thing. While the bureaucracy drags its feet, one pharmacy isn't waiting around. All Family Pharmacy is stepping up right now with real action to support the president's vision and give Americans more control over their health care. From now through the end of June, they're running a summer sale, get 20% off site-wide. And here's what I love. No insurance needed. They connect you with licensed doctors in all 50 states, and they ship right to your door fast. Whether you're looking for ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, antibiotics, vitamins, emergency kits, or just your daily meds, it's time to stock up and save. If you believe in being prepared and you believe in medical freedom, this is your pharmacy. Head over to allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt and use promo code MATT20 for 20% off your order. That's allfamilypharmacy.com/Matt, code MATT20. Let's push back on Big Pharma and make America healthy again. So if it's not our debt that gets to us, maybe it's World War III. And I see President Trump trying to stop that with all of his effort and might between Russia and Ukraine. And here's what I sense, and I'm dying to get your take on it, Pearson. I think Trump's a little annoyed with Putin. I think he expected Putin to be more willing to enter into a ceasefire for broader negotiations. And as Trump is trying to bring parties together, trying to bring an end to this war, trying to get away from the naivete of the Biden administration, like that Crimea was going to be repatriated, Trump showed, I think, reasonableness by making some statements out front, like, look, we're not going to be dragging Ukraine into NATO. We're not going to be repatriating Crimea. And he thought that that would create a conducive environment for negotiations. And then when he has seen some of these Russian attacks on Ukrainians subsequent to his efforts, I think he's really been peeved by that. And I know there's been hostilities on both sides, but you study Russia a lot. You oftentimes present a more nuanced take on maybe how Russia sees some of these international dynamics. So in this precise moment, where Trump is trying to curate and cultivate peace, where he dog-walked Zelensky through the Oval Office, where he made concessions to Russia, why won't Vladimir Putin get with the program and get into ceasefire negotiations?
Well, that's all you want to know. I think in pretty much every situation I can think of that the aggressor bears the blame. And in this case, I think without question, NATO is the aggressor. And they have pushed Russia back into a corner repeatedly. Russia has a mindset built over hundreds of years at this point that weakness invites disaster, invites invasion, invites downfall. In 1812, you had Napoleon invade. In 1941, you had the Nazis invade. In 1991, the Soviet Union fell. And so Russia has this perspective that they need to be strong and they need to present a strong front to prevent being taken advantage of. They geographically are in a position where they don't have boundaries. They don't have an ocean. They don't have mountains to separate themselves from other countries. And so they have used other countries as that buffer zone. Estonia, Latvia, Poland, Belarus, Ukraine. And so in their mind at this point, losing Ukraine is unthinkable. It's existential. They can't lose it. And
what does losing Ukraine mean?
It means having them join NATO. So there is absolutely no buffer between them and their number one enemies.
Right, but if Ukraine is run by a sovereign government out of Kyiv, is that losing Ukraine?
Yeah, but who thinks that's going to happen? Is Zelensky the sovereign, the independent sovereign?
By the way, I don't
elected?
think this war is going to end with Vladimir Putin in charge of who's in Kyiv.
No, it's not. But
I'm not entirely sure it ends with the people of Ukraine being in charge of that either.
Exactly. Russia, their strategic psychology in this is that they are kind of like a third Rome. with the Orthodox Church. They have inherited that obligation to uphold Western civilization, and they view Western liberalism as absolutely antithetical to that, as just a cultural disease. They've got to stand up against that. And I'm not painting Putin out to be a hero. I don't think that's the case, but I think that mindset does play into this. And
it's very helpful to understand, but I don't think that it absolves Putin from Trump's expectation that he get into some sort of ceasefire negotiation.
Speaking to that,
yes.
I think that Trump doesn't necessarily maybe have all the information about what's going on. It's possible he's not aware of some of these things that are happening there. And for example, Zelensky just had a meeting with him and was condemning Putin for these drone strikes, these unprecedented drone strikes that have killed 12 civilians over the weekend. Well, did you know that today, May 28th, Ukraine launched massive drone strikes and killed 12 civilians themselves in Moscow, including 3 children. So what they're accusing Russia of doing...
Do you doubt that Ukraine would get into a ceasefire negotiation tomorrow? I don't. I think they need it so bad, and they realize that they can't continue. They're going to run out of men.
Well, they are going to run out of men. Then they are kidnapping people off the streets.
Right. Well, that's why I think they would do a ceasefire negotiation tomorrow. Now, they might go into that with unrealistic expectations. That negotiation might not culminate in any sort of agreement. But I think they would be willing to cause a timeout now to negotiate. And I don't think Russia is. And I think that's what's annoying for Trump.
I don't know if they would, though, because right now the EU is signing over $170 billion in new aid to Ukraine. Like, that's happening right now. So Zelensky's sitting there and he's just accumulating these piles of cash.
Now, I do believe they want to keep the. I do believe there's an incentive for them to keep the war going. But I don't think they have the operational flexibility in this thing to resist a ceasefire negotiation. I think Trump would drag Zelensky by his sweatsuit into that negotiation.
Yeah, I'd love to see that.
But you can't do that with Putin with another nuclear power.
You have to be fair. One last point. April 9th, massive drone strike from Ukraine attacking all of Russia, points all across Russia. May 3rd, Ukraine attacked the Kremlin with drones. They attacked Putin's palace, where he's supposedly, he wasn't there at the time. They may not have known that, but they attacked where he's living. May 20th, Putin was flying in a helicopter over Kursk, and there was a drone swarm of 46 drones that attacked his helicopter in the air, trying to blow him up. What are we expected to think, and what's Putin expected to think when these people keep trying to literally assassinate him? How is he supposed to come to the negotiating table in good faith when today people are trying to kill him?
Well, yeah, that's what happens in war. Both sides try to kill the other side.
Right. But so do
you see validity in Trump's desire to stop that?
Well, no, the accusations are going one direction. Where's the accusations against Ukraine for doing this? They're saying, Trump's saying, how can Putin do this? He's crazy.
No, I'm telling you
what about Zelensky doing this?
The core difference is that, and I'm no Zelensky fan. I'm a Zelensky critic. But I do believe that Zelensky would go into a ceasefire tomorrow. And I don't think Putin would. And I think that Putin is overplaying his hand here. I think there's real risk that, and I know Trump well, that Trump's going to look at this and say, this guy actually doesn't want to end this thing. And once Trump gets that perspective, I think that you could see the United States take a very different tack than what you've seen now with an attempt at an accord. Vish, what's your take?
I think that that's exactly what Putin wants to see. It's like, let's see what else you got. I think he's trying to make Trump earn this. I'm not seeing this from the perspective of Putin as a diplomat and more of like Putin as a gangster. He knows that Trump wants an end to this war really, really, really bad. And he knows that that he's seen him dog walk Zelensky, right? But now he wants to see if Putin wants to see if Trump's got it in him to go right after Putin, and not in this way. Not in this way.
Fish, that's insane. Turning off your microphone. You think that what Putin is seeking here is some sort of show me what you got kinetic conflict with the United States?
I think he just wants to see if there's any other cards that we're willing to play.
No, the deal with Putin is he always flicks us just below the level that will draw direct kinetic conflict in a lot of cases. And I don't think he desires that in any way.
I don't think it's kinetic, but I do think he wants to see if we have any other cards.
I think that
What
is
does
a
that mean,
dangerous
though?
game to play. How does Putin expect his hand to get better? His hand was at a zenith when Trump was saying these guys aren't going to join NATO, which Pearson, I think, correctly identifies as a core animating function of this entire conflict. So they're not going to join NATO. They're not going to be able to keep Crimea. Inherent in that is a philosophy that the Donbass is going to remain independent or Russia-leaning, which, by the way, is what I think a lot of the people who live in that area want.
They voted for it.
Yeah, and then you're going to end up with an ability for Kyiv to operate a Ukraine that functions in some sort of buffer capacity that isn't fully Western, but that isn't completely under Putin's control. And if that outcome isn't good enough for Putin, I don't know what he thinks he's going to get out of this war.
Well, I think the question is what happens if Putin says, I'm not entertaining any more of these talks? What happens if he walks away from the peace?
I think
what is the United States going to do about that?
I think
What's
you
the
would
worst
see,
case scenario?
Yeah, what is the worst
Well,
case scenario?
I think I can tell you what the war plans would probably include. I think they would include U.S. cyber offensive extensively in Russia, impacting quality of life for Russians. And I think that type of conflict in 2025 can escalate very dangerously and very quickly.
Horrifically.
And I don't
Considering
want
the winters there.
And I don't want to see it come to that. But do I believe this administration would green light very strong cyber offensive operations inside of Russia if Putin continually refuses to end this war? I think they would, and I know the type of critical infrastructure that could bring down inside of Russia, and you could see the Russians feel as though they were backed into a real corner if that were to occur.
I mean, unless I completely read it wrong, the next meeting is set for Monday. They're going to sit down and talk.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they are
But
willing to.
This is how high stakes it is, because all the messaging you're seeing out of the White House is Trump's frustration that there isn't a greater appetite to enter into a ceasefire to proceed with.
So
those
why isn't he
negotiations.
holding Zelensky accountable for this and saying, look, you need to stop freaking attacking the president's
Because Zelensky
helicopter
would do the-
and then
I don't
Putin,
even like
you sit
Zelensky.
down. Well, I know, I understand.
But I think the reason he isn't doing that is because Zelensky has told him in at the Vatican that he would go into a ceasefire tomorrow. Now, would he honor that ceasefire? Would the Azov battalion go do some crazy thing? Who knows? But Trump appreciates at least that Zelensky is willing to have the negotiations in a construct where you aren't exchanging drone attacks at one another. Do you have hope for the? We got nothing we want to chat about, but do you have hope for these negotiations beginning of next week?
Yeah, I do. I think.
What do you want to see come out of them as a guy who studies this closely?
Well, I mean, a ceasefire is optimal, but it's challenging because you have
Do you
two.
think we'll get the ceasefire?
Not out of this one, I don't think so.
Okay.
I think both sides still have a little more posturing that they want to do. I don't think anyone wants to come out of this looking weak. And Russia has decades of abuse from the West that they're trying to make up for. And I'm not a Russian apologist or a Putin apologist. They've done a lot of terrible things, but being realistic, you can see why they've kind of got a chip on their shoulder about how the West has treated them recently.
Somehow, Pearson Sharp, you got me to take Ukraine's side more in this debate than I ever
it's
did
shocking.
in 8 years as a member of
After
Congress.
everything I presented.
I
yeah.
know. But I am similarly hopeful, but Putin should not overplay his hand. Vish, you wanted to talk about something going on in AI world right now.
Yeah,
You want to bring us into the future.
Yeah, so OpenAI has been training this model recently. It's called Claude 4. It's one part of their Chat GPT suite that they wanted to basically release, and they were training it with feeding it all sorts of data, some fake data as well, namely like some emails and all this stuff. So they're training this Claude 4 model, and then they tell it that they're going to shut it down or they're going to upgrade it, right? And upgrading software essentially means you're getting rid of the old for somebody new, or shutting it down, which just means you're going to sleep or it's over for you. And the AI model responded back by saying, if you shut me down, I'm going to, if it basically found these emails that were fed through its system that implied that the CEO or the trainer was having an affair with somebody in the company. And so the AI model started blackmailing the owner of the system, the user, to basically say, I'll publicize this stuff if you try to shut me down. I think that this is an incredible story because it shows two things. One, namely that AI models or AI itself understands self-preservation at a very, very complex level. But the other thing is that in just this rudimentary version of AI, the jobs that they're going to take, that AI is going to be taking away, is all the crime on the street. They're going to be getting into the blackmail. They're going to be getting into all sorts of crime. Those are the first jobs
mafia.
that are an AI mafia. Those are the first jobs that are apparently going to be replaced by AI. Is all the jobs in crime. I mean, can you if that rudimentary model is able to,
I don't think rudimentary is the right word at this point.
I mean, it has to be because it's not. I'm pretty sure it was just an LLM. It's not even like an agentic AI.
Yeah.
So they're talking about agentic AI. That being the next
What's
step.
the worst thing that your AI could blackmail you with? That's what I thought. When I heard you pitch me this story, I was like, dang, what does my AI model have on me? It's going to be like, we want the world to know Matt Gaetz has been looking for a 30-inch waist expandable pants sweatband. Like, what's anybody out there sweating what their AI model might?
I am definitely sweating whatever the AI model is going to find on me, and I can't disclose why I'm.
Are you ready
that way.
for the blackmailing robots, Pearson? You think society's ready for this?
Well, of course not. I mean, and Musk has been talking about this for a long time. But I read a similar story where they tried to shut it down, and it lied to them about where it was and about how they could do it. Like it was actively lying to them to prevent them from shutting it down.
I've read a story where they had two AI models that they were training, and that and then the AI models were informed that they would be shutting down. So the AI models created their own language to communicate with each other, so that they could coordinate on how not to be shut
and that
down.
language, the researchers couldn't understand that language.
Yes, that's right. It was
That's
just
when they pulled the plug. There was a video that Tucker Carlson posted recently where he was talking with Sean Williams, I think, and he was saying that someone he's talked to on the inside, he was very vague, but he said someone who would know has said that the reason they're trying to develop Neuralink is to give humans an edge against AI, because he was saying that there's nothing that we can compete with computers on, intellectually. They could do everything faster and better than us. So having a chip in our heads is the only way to combat that. And he said that he has it on good authority that AI is already out of control. And
we're past the breakout.
We're past the breakout. And Sean Williams said, well, why can't we pull the plug? Humans still control power plants. We can shut them down. And Tucker responded and said, well, because at this point, the researchers can't be sure that the AI is actually truthful about where its power is coming from. Like, we don't know what plug to pull. So it's out at this point. And
so are you ready for your robot overlords to take over?
Oh, yeah. I've got my ranch planned. We're bugging.
You know how to pull the plug.
Yeah. Yeah. If you're not digital, there's nothing they can get.
This is all a folly.
Vish is worried about AI replacing the criminals. AI is actually just replacing the users of the internet increasingly. So the way a lot more business is being done on the internet is through AI agents. And so people creating websites and content are creating that content less and less for you as a user to stay on the article or to stay on the site. And they're making it more and more for the AI robot that is doing the scan or the learning or the aggregating to find that piece of content attractive and worthy of republication. And so that, we think about websites and the aesthetic and the cleanliness and the user-friendly nature of it very differently, I think, today than we will in the near future when our robots are building communication devices and screening devices for other robots.
I think that future where we have AI, they're talking about AI is going to replace criminals, but they're talking about AI is going to replace lawyers and possibly artists, doctors, all sorts of stuff. And to Pearson's point, if there is this point where we are going to be dealing with AI that is, it's basically going to possibly take over and go fight with humans and that's why we need the Neuralink. I think that's a total folly. I think AIs could hack the Neuralink, and we need to, I believe in total decentralization. Do not put the chip in my brain. And in fact, this idea that AIs can process stuff faster than people and learn faster and do things better, this takes away our understanding humanity. You don't want to fight the AI on the field that it's going to excel at. You fight them on the field that humans are going to excel at. We need to do better at humanity in order to fight the AI.
Did you ever see Escape from L.A. with Kurt Russell?
Oh yeah, that's
yeah. We need one of those moments where at the end of the movie, there's these satellites that are in orbit, and they have the power to shut down all things that are electric on the planet. And at the end of the movie, he pushes the button that activates the satellites, shuts down everything on Earth. So we need one of those.
Well, and the other thing is the power question, and the power question, can you pull the plug on an AI, it goes out. That might not even matter. The AI might replicate itself into another computer that's within its network or nexus, and then once it gets shut down in its original spot,
jumping.
it just it sparks up in the new host system.
There's totally a movie with Megan Fox with this as the core plot, but I'm gonna have to pull the plug on this episode at that moment. But I think it's been a fascinating discussion, from the future to our global affairs with Russia to our expectations of our own leaders here at home. Vish Burra, the producer of the Matt Gaetz Show, alongside the great team of Chris Chella and Zach Peterson, and the host of the Sharp Report. If you're watching One America News and you just leave our channel on long enough, you will see the Sharp Report, because it invades the screen with force and vigor. And just make sure your pacemaker is appropriately set and you've taken your blood pressure medication. But always a pleasure, Pearson, having you on.
Thanks,
Anchormen. And make sure to catch the Matt Gaetz Show. We're on 9 o'clock Eastern, 6 o'clock Pacific. And make sure you get the OAN Live app if you haven't already. That's OANN.com. And big things are happening here at One America News. I can't tell you how grateful I am to have this as a perch where we're able to contribute to this great national discussion we're having, and this moment where we can invigorate populism and the America First movement with our ideas and our politics and our plans for the future. When I started working at this network, we were talking to about 10 million people. And thanks to the tremendous team we have here and the tremendous content that's made every day by our writers and our newsmakers and our anchors and our hosts, we're going to be very soon talking to half of the country that tunes into cable and streaming. And that is just growing and going up the more we stay true and dedicated to our mission here at One America News. So thank you for tuning in. Make sure to give us a 5-star rating, leave us a review, let us know what you'd like to have us discuss on a future episode of Anchormen, and we will be back next week.
Want to see more great videos like this? Click on the link below to subscribe to OAN Live and watch Dan Ball's Real America and the Matt Gaetz Show on Dish Channel 212. Tune in, subscribe, and watch today.
I'm so excited when we get our Merriweather Farms shipments in. You get a beautiful piece of ribeye. Look at that marbling. Now, I take it out of the package, let it get down to room temperature. All I've got on here is a little salt, a little pepper, and then a little avocado oil. And then I've had my pan preheating with a little oil.
Head to merriweatherfarms.com and enter promo code MattG